All right, so here we are. We're going to get ready to do the front pads and rotors. We've already done the inspection on it, so we do know what it needs. We're just going to walk you through the process. First things, we're going to go over a few items. This right here is called a caliper. You may have heard this mentioned before, but what this holds the pads, and the hydraulic fluid fits in this area. When you press that brake pedal, it pushes brake fluid forward, squeezes the pads on the rotor like it's pinching it, like this. So we inspect that. Back here is what we call slide pins. So these, and I'm struggling a little bit, are extremely stiff to come out. These should be well lubricated. And all this, if you can see, this is like a gummy grease, because as the heat gets on there, it turns it into a sticky material instead of a sliding lubricant. So we want to take these, we're eventually going to take these off, clean them, re-lube them. But this caliper comes off like so. Inside here we have a piston. This has to get pushed back to be able to receive the new brake pads. In here, your brake pads sit in what we call an abutment, also known as a bracket. Simple as that. And these should move freely. These move a little bit, but they are stuck a little bit. This one was a little bit more. Sometimes we drop them right there on the floor just to show them who's boss. So brake pads are getting down pretty low. You got to remember, as brake pads get lower, it might look like there's some left, but they can't dispensate the heat as well, and so it causes more issues like slide pins sticking. That backs up and you can end up damaging caliper. So if you zoom in here too on the brake rotor, you can see all the hot spots where this is dark here. This should be a nice shiny metal, but as that pad is sticking, because of the rust and the corrosion built up inside here, it's holding that pad against there and it's not releasing properly. So we're causing excess heat on the brake rotor and on the brake pad, causing premature failure. Here's a good example of brake sticking, and you have to look closely here. But as we can see, right here is your pad life that's left. On one pad, on the outboard pad, the inboard, slightly less. These should be exactly even. The only reason they should have different heights or widths remaining pad life is because something's sticking inside this bracket. And again, it's a reason why we clean them so well and make sure that there is no rust in there. So it's basically holding a little bit of pressure on the brake the whole time, even though your foot's not on it, and that's causing premature failure.
Are you filming this? First, pick like the rustiest car out there to work on.
All right, so we're back here with the abutment, otherwise known as the bracket. Like I said before, this pad's just going to slide right inside these grooves. I've removed the clip from the bottom. It's going to look just like the one in the top. But as you can see in here, and you get a good angle, it is full of rust, corrosion, all kinds of things. And that's going to squeeze that pad and restrict its movement. Again, we want these to be able to move back and forth freely. That way we're getting close to 65,000, 85,000 out of a brake job. So, again, these are these pins. They go right inside the bracket. And again, you can see how stiff that is going in. Doesn't even want to go in. So what we're going to do, and we're going to next take you over to the Sandblaster, show how we clean everything up, and go our next step. All right, so this is our Sandblaster. Ours is the biggest one Snap-on makes. Snap-on is a major tool brand in the automotive industry. They make the highest quality tools. Again, that's what we like to use. That way, again, everything we do is done with professionalism. In here, we're gonna clean up this brake caliper and show you what it looks like. We'll show you what these pins look like afterwards as well. You won't be able to see a whole lot as I get in here. You're just gonna have to take my word, it's really cool. All right, let's take a look, see how they did. All right, as we can see now, there is no rust left in here. So we're back to the metal that these were originally made out of. Cleaned up on both sides. Those pins anymore. All that old grease is gone. And next step, we're gonna start reassembling this bad boy. So you can either install these off the car or on the car, up to you. Sometimes it's easier to do it when it's on the car, sometimes not. Do it both ways so you can see. Okay, so depending on the type of brakes you buy, they may come with a little grease packet. A lot of people put them on the pads. That is a big no-no. You don't want to do that. There should never be any grease on the pad itself, whether it's on the ears, the backing plate. What happens is, as that grease gets hot, it'll turn to a bit more of a liquid. It'll actually run down on your rotor, cause those hot spots, and you'll see what we saw on that rotor before with those black streaks and things in it. So no grease should ever go on the brake pad itself. Instead, that grease is supposed to be used for these slide pins. So, and it doesn't take a whole lot. We're just gonna put enough on there to lube that back up. Reassemble it. Sometimes it takes a bit. You got to work it in there. We want to take our time, get the grease lubed up. So again, that these slide pins slide effectively. Sometimes it helps to get a little bit of grease inside this boot itself.
Just get a little extra for later.
And now we're starting to see that slide a lot easier as I can move that freely in and out. That's what we want to be able to see. All right. So as we go, if we get any grease on anything, we do want to use a high power cleaner like brake cleaner itself to kind of clean up and get that grease off so that we're not contaminating the rotor or any other part of the brake pad. So once we get that cleaned up, we are going to be okay to start reassembly. But before we start that, we got one final step in the cleanup process. And that's to clean our rotor. And again, we want to either use soap, like a Dawn dishwashing liquid and soap, and scrub these down, or brake clean itself. They put a rust inhibitor. They spray these rotors on them so as they come from overseas and whatnot, they don't get all that rust. So it's going to be really important that we clean these completely off. And when you're spraying, you just want to spray them liberally inside your cooling fins. Because if you leave any of that on, it's going to cause premature wear on your brand new brakes as well. And then on the vehicle itself, this is what we call the hub. On this vehicle, this is the hub and the bearing all together. But you can see there is rust ridges all the way around here. Anywhere we have rust and not a smooth surface, we have the ability to have that rotor sit on there a little cockeyed, and we're talking thousandths of an inch. And what that will do is, again, cause pulsation, premature wear. So we're going to go through, we're going to clean all these rust rings off, get this nice and clean. If you are lucky enough to have an air compressor, and we can use a tool such as this to grind it off. If not, you can just do it by hand with some sandpaper. Probably want to use an 80 or 100 grit sandpaper and get all that rust out of there. Now some vehicles, you see this more on the foreign vehicles. Some domestic have gone to it, but they'll actually put a countersunk screw in here to hold this rotor flush in here during assembly. Always good to put that stuff back on. So there has been a lot of advancements in tools, like I just used that battery operated impact. But anytime we use one, we still like to go over it with a hand wrench and just make sure that everything is right where it should be and as tight as it should be. Your rotor should be able to move freely in there without rubbing. It's always good to test and check as you go. Next, we're going to install our brake pads. The back side or closest to the car is called your inboard side. And the outer side is called the outboard side. They sit in there just like that. Now they do make various tools for compressing this piston. You never want to grab it with a channel lock. You run the risk of chipping this piston right in here. And behind here is hydraulic fluid, and that would come gushing out, and then you need a caliper. This tool is made by Lang. You can pick these up on Amazon or whatnot. They're usually under 30 bucks for something like this. And we've already gone ahead and removed the master cylinder cap. So that is the reservoir that holds all the brake fluid up in the engine compartment. And you want to remove that first so that you don't blow out any seals. Once I get this guy in here, this tool is also nice because it puts a nice even pressure. You want to go nice and slow. This piston should move back real freely. If it's struggling at all, we could have a restriction in this rubber hose or in the caliper itself. Different ways to test that. And we'll get into that into later videos. And like I was saying before, this is the hydraulic hose. Since this is on a suspension and it is flexing with the vehicle, it has to have a flexible hose. Whereas up here is a steel line. This is not moving, it stays with the body. It goes to a flexible hose so that it can move with the suspension. If we ran a steel line all the way through, it would just snap every time you hit a bump. So, once this is on, this should go on freely. You should not have to force it. Should never need a hammer.
Install your slide pins back in there.
And again, since I used an electric impact, I always go everything by hand. Just make sure we don't have a weak battery or something causing an improper torque. I'm gonna go ahead and just wipe down any extra grease that might be on the outside that could make its way down to our brake rotor or pads and cause premature failure. And then just give it one more spray, wipe off. One other thing you should inspect that I didn't mention is these are dust boots. These hold all the grease and everything in here. So if these are torn, dry rotted, they should be replaced. And they do make rebuild kits where you get a pin, bushings, whatever might be included. Each caliper is slightly different depending on the year, make, and model. All right, so if you have any questions or comments, make sure you leave them below and we'll get back to you with an answer on that. And feel free to reach out to us anytime on the website, Facebook, YouTube. We're here to help. So if you're doing your own job and you're just stuck on something, reach out to us. I'd be more than happy to help with you, walk you through any issues. If you like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe. We're gonna start producing a lot more. And thanks for joining in, guys. I appreciate it. Hey everybody, thanks for watching that video. Don't forget to click and subscribe to this channel to get more information, or click over here and watch our next video.